All right, Josh Smith here at my studio, live from Flat 5. My guest today is a great friend and truly a huge influence on my playing since I was a kid. I first heard him, I think, with John Mellencamp, and I saw him on Austin City Limits with Joe Ely, killing me with the Marshall and a reverb tank. Oh, just made such a huge impression. And then I was lucky enough that when he started the band Storyville with the guys from Double Trouble and with Malford Milligan and this great band, to get to meet him as a kid. And it was just always a huge impact on me. His playing live, it was a big thing for me. And the fact that we're friends now and have played together, little me would be freaking out. So, dude, just thank you so much for doing this, and it's an honor. You're a huge influence on me.
Oh, thanks, Josh. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, man. So, dude, for people who don't know your story, and everybody knows you're an Austin legend, but you're from Kentucky, right? And I'm curious that with everybody, do they have a musical family or not? Who puts the guitar in their hand for the first time? For me, it was just complete luck. My dad bought this guitar for me, but there's no musicians or in my immediate family other than my uncle who was out here in L.A., so he wasn't around. So who knows how it happened? How did it happen for you?
My mom played piano by ear a little bit, but nothing to speak of. My grandfather had a drum set in the basement. Um, I kind of gravitated towards drums to begin with. And then I heard the Beatles and I was like, I heard Revolver. And then I just, all of a sudden it was like, man, the drums are cool, but I think guitar is cooler. And, uh, you know, uh, my mother died when I was 10 years old. And my father was really, really, really supportive of me playing an instrument. And then he remarried and I kind of let the guitar thing go a little bit, but my stepmother, my first stepmother, um, knew a guy in the neighborhood that played guitar, and she sort of talked me into going over and taking lessons from this guy. And I was kind
Oh,
of maybe not even going to play, keep going, but I went over and he got me going on, the uh, Keith Richards and Hendrix, and
hmm
then I hung with him for 6 months, a year, and then he goes, "Man, I think you need to go take lessons with this other guy because you're I can't teach you anymore." And that's just kind of where it happened. And it wasn't like anybody made me take Suzuki violin lessons or the
right.
piano teacher didn't come over. Man, I was just drawn. There was something about it that drew me in.
And where did when did you get the first guitar, and how old were you then when you started going over to that guy's house in that neighborhood?
So before that, uh, I could remember going to the mall in Louisville uh, and taking lessons from a guy in the music store where I rented a K Electric. And like my mom, because my mom, basically friends of my father, like wives of his friends would pick me up, take me to the mall to take car lessons. And I rented a K for $50 or something like that, and had the Mel Bay book, and
Yeah.
made it. I was like, man, this isn't it. And somehow I convinced my father to get me a Fender Mustang, and then I
Oh
got a
wow.
Mustang. Yeah, I wish I still had it. Competition red, with the white racing stripes on it.
Yeah. The rate. Oh my God.
Um, so I was like that. I was 10 or 11, maybe 11 at that point, and then. Um, 13 or 14 when I started taking lessons with the guy up in the attic at the neighbor's house he had a blue melody maker and a brown Fender concert.
Wow.
And it was just like, man, the sound he made it really drew me in.
What's amazing is you can't forget what gear he even had. That's how obsessive we are about this stuff. And I think it's interesting to me that you talk about the Suzuki schools and the schools in the malls and stuff. I think I came in at the tail end of that. The first place my dad took me for a lesson was whatever he found in the phone book, and it was called ASM Music School. And we went down, This has got to be 1985 because I was 5 years old, about to turn six, something like that, 84, 85. And after one lesson, they were telling him that the cheap guitar that my parents had bought me was not good enough, and I had to spend $280 or something on a real acoustic guitar. And that was when my parents realized this was a scam, and they found me some jazz kid out of the back of the classifieds. But yeah, those schools were really prevalent, really prevalent.
Yeah,
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 crazy.
I know, and it's so much of I think our initial experiences with uh, really shape whether we stay with it or not. And I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I think a lot of people probably get discouraged. They get with a teacher that's not empathetic or isn't open to like trying to find the voice, like everyone's little voice, where it's like cookie cutter. You'll do this, you'll do this, you'll do this, and then everybody does the same thing. And
Mm.
so I think we're both fortunate to have stumbled into working with guys that weren't quite as rigid.
So after the guy in the attic, you what progressed through a few different teachers. When did like playing with friends or garage bands or the first gig type scenario kind of come in to the picture?
Pretty fast, really. I mean, um, the next guy that I took lessons from was a blues guitar player, and like day one, he sent me home with 3 records. He said, "You can borrow them, but you need to go buy your own copy." And it was Magic Sam, West Side Soul, Butterfield Blues Band, and Live at the Regal.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it was like like a trifecta right there.
Yeah.
So like I copped, the like Sweet Home Chicago, the Magic Sam version of Sweet Home Chicago, and I would play along with Live at the Regal. And Bloomfield was harder for me to cop
Mm.
right off, I mean, like off the bat. But it was not long after that. Like I became totally obsessed. I mean,
Mm.
like, and found some guys that were into that. And then it was the weird thing for me was is that I got into all that before I got into the Allman Brothers and ZZ Top. The bands. It's usually the other way around. You
Yeah.
hear
Yeah.
Almonds and well, where did Stormy Money come from and all that.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
But I uh, copped some Hendrix stuff and some Keith Richards stuff, but then it was like right into the blues thing. And I found some guys that were into that, and then they kind of got me into the Allman Brothers and everything, and it was cool to combine all that. But we would jam, like one of the a couple of guys from high school had basements where their parents would let us play loud,
Mm.
and I can remember I was 15 or 16, and we had this paper in Louisville called the Bargain Mart.
Uh huh.
And it was basically before the internet, and it was like a free classified paper. And I would go get it on Wednesdays. It came out or Thursdays, and I saw Les Paul guitar, old Les Paul guitar, gold Les Paul guitar, and somehow convinced my father after he got off work to drive me across the bridge into Indiana and uh, look at this guitar, and it was a 52
Yeah.
gold top.
Okay.
And it was 275, and I talked him in loaning me the money, and I got that guitar. And once I got that guitar, man, it was like, oh, I'm all in. And
Yeah.
then coinciding with the Allman Brothers and everything else, and then Freddie King, P90s, and I'm like, this
Yeah.
is cool. I just couldn't figure out how to play a mute, with that weird bridge on there.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a
I,
difficult guitar. Yeah.
I took it down to the music store and I just said, "Can you put a tunematic? Can you put like a tunematic in?" And the guy, he goes, "Yeah, I can do that." And once he drilled into it, he realized that the neck angle was wrong, and so he had to grind down the bottom of the tunematic, and he was mad at me. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
but it worked. I mean,
Wow. Wow. Man. Yeah. That's. How'd you talk your dad into buying the guitar? I could never figure
I
that one
told
out.
him I would pay him back, and he said, "All right." Well, and this was right after. Yeah, I can remember I had a broken leg too. It's funny how you remember these things. I had a broken leg. My mother, it wasn't long after my mother had died, I guess, or maybe I can't remember. Maybe if I was 14 or 15. Um, but he just loaned me the money. And the funny thing was, is we were in Indiana, and he said he didn't bring any money or a checkbook with him, and he just told the people, "I promise I'll mail you a check as soon as I get home," and they let us take the guitar.
Wow.
I mean, it's like
Simpler times, right?
simpler times, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, unbelievable. All right, so then when's the first paying gig, and how did that feel like? Because I know that feeling was like for me, it was no turning back. When someone put $20 in my pocket after a gig, it changed it all.
I mean, the first paying gigs, I got in a band in high school. I'm trying to think if that really was the first paying gig. I think it was. I got into a band in high school. Um, uh, I was the only white guy in the band, and we played mainly R&B stuff, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yeah,
Uh, but then we would throw in like Grover Washington Jr. song,
Mr.
or
Magic. Yeah,
Mr. Magic, or Hang Up Your Hang-Ups. We
yeah,
some the Herbie stuff that I could digest, and we'd
yeah.
play like Parisian, and but it was a lot of funkier stuff too. And we would play down at the University of Louisville. We played down there a few times and other places, but and then we also played at a place in Louisville called Joe's Poem Room. Um, and it was really like super cool. It was just hard to fathom this quantum leap from the basement to like you're playing and like nobody's acting like you don't belong there, and they're
Right.
actually digging it, and then somebody hands you 25, $40 at the end of the night, and then you got
Yeah.
free cokes all night long too.
Yeah.
It's
It's that feeling is amazing. Like I remember playing a gig for $75 and start I then it became a regular gig. I'm 13 years old and I'm just stuffing an envelope in my drawer, and so I could buy another guitar. I mean, that's all I cared about. But it was like people will pay me to do this. That's it. I don't need to. Can I quit school now? And it was like, no, that's not allowed. But it was certainly on my mind immediately.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Was there any music in school for you at all, like high school or
No,
anything?
there was no. I mean, I took lessons while I was in school, but not at school. I mean, I know I have friends here that like had like vocal teachers and took voice lessons uh, in high school and even guitar lessons, but there was none. Didn't have any of that.
Uh, so then, when you graduate from high school, is it just all systems go, full time gigging musician?
No, I went to Indiana University because I was going to be a jazz major.
Okay.
They have a great school of music there. I got in, and I actually before that summer I went to Berkeley for 5 weeks,
Oh,
and
really?
yeah, I did, and that changed my life. That the first night I was there, I was 17, and I drove from Kentucky to Boston with a Rand McNally Atlas on the seat, before
Right.
this before GPS or anything.
Yeah.
Drove myself, no big deal. 17, got a place to park my car for five
Wow.
weeks. Walked down the street and caught Larry Coryell at the jazz workshop, and then was there in the 5 weeks I was there. Let's see, I saw Pat Metheny 5 nights in a row, and went over to his apartment and took a lesson from him.
Wow.
And upstairs that during that week was the Dixie Dregs, and I was one night I was above Pat after the show every night, and I was sitting downstairs talking to him, and Steve Morse came up to say hello. They were buddies from Miami, and just this could be a long story, but I'm gonna in a nutshell. Steve showed Pat how to use his MXR digital delay to make a chorusing sound,
Uh-huh.
and I was standing right there at the moment that Pat discovered the wide chorusing thing. And the next time I saw him, it was just like, holy shit, I'm in this, like in the middle of this beautiful thing. But
Yeah.
I was standing right there when that happened.
That's
And then
amazing.
another week, Pat Martino was there, and his amp blew up, was getting ready to blow up on the first night. And I just went up to him on break, said, "You need an amp?" And he goes, "Man, I sure could use one." And I wrote back down to the dorm and got my Music Man amp and let him use it all week. And he put me on the guest list for the whole week and then gave me a lesson too. And
Wow.
I still have all the stuff he wrote out.
Oh my
So
God.
it was like 5 weeks of like, all of a sudden I'm in downtown Boston. And so I go to Indiana, and it's like, I'm not cut out for this. This is a classical, one of the best classical programs in the world. And the jazz players were all like way more advanced than me. And there were no other guitar players. So I did it for a year, made it through the year, and then met a bunch of guys that had graduated from the School of the Music, just graduated, one of whom was Kenny Aronoff.
Hmm.
And they had a band that they were starting, and I joined that band and toured the Midwest with those guys, and realized that I was learning a hell of a lot more about music doing that than in school.
Yeah, the on-the-job training. There's no replacement for that.
No,
Yeah. And what kind of tunes were you playing? What was that? What was that band? What was the music?
it was, all right, keep in mind that we're playing in clubs where the usual fare is REO Speedwagon and,
Hmm.
Journey and that kind of stuff. And we were playing Weather Report, Steely Dan, like this Gino Vanelli. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like some really cool, harmonically, some cool stuff. Kind of convinced them to throw in an Allman Brothers tune at one point. But
Hmm.
we were playing all these Midwest rock clubs, and we were kind of a novelty that was sort of a fusion-y or jazz rock. I don't know, whatever you call
Right.
it.
Yeah.
But we got away with it for a while.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, so then when does the transition happen from, school and playing gigs and just being a working man guitar player to like doing, sessions, but mostly like to doing the sideman stuff that started to happen? How did that door get opened?
I moved to Austin. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was after I played in the band with Kenny and those guys, I hung around Bloomington longer, and I played in I had a house band gig with a country band, Sam Collins and the Hard Times Boys.
Hmm.
And we would do a house gig on the weekend, and then we'd play like VFWs and stuff like that. And
Uh-huh.
I played in a couple other bands too that were like, would do everything from like, I played in this one band that we would cover George Jones, and then we would cover a King Crimson tune, and then an
That's
NRBQ tune, and then an Elvis Costello tune, so it was kind of like I wasn't sure where I wanted to go. But then all of a sudden, like, one day I realized, I look at the records that are stacked up, and it's Joe Ely and Lou Ann Barton and the Fabulous Thunderbirds and the Leroy Brothers. And I just, a friend of mine from Indiana had moved to Austin, and she invited me to come down to check it out. And I did that. And it was like, I went to the Continental Club and heard the Cobras with Denny Freeman and Derek O'Brien. And I
Mhm.
went, on Sunday night at Hutt's Hamburgers, Angela Straley, and the T-Birds are all hanging out, and it's just like this. You walk up Congress Avenue, and there's just several dives, all with these great guitar players and everything. And I literally I flew home and packed my Honda Civic up with everything I could get into it, and drove back down there, and I've been here ever since.
With no idea on what you would be doing.
No idea, and she let me sleep on her floor for 3 weeks, and I went out and I got a job at a record store at the
Mhm.
Highland Mall. And it was a time in Austin where, first of all, it was like there was a third as many people here, but you could go sit in. People would let you sit in. And on Monday nights, they had this thing called the Austin All Stars. And I would go down there and sit in. And within like 3 times that I played like one song, people knew who I was. And then
Uh-huh.
I called the guy at the local paper, the rookie move, say, hey, you know anybody that needs a guitar player? And he goes, well, I don't know who you are and if you're any good, but I have a friend that is, her name's Lucinda Williams. If you're
Right.
any good, here's her phone number, give her a call. And 2 weeks later, I'm on the way to the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. Uh, and we were in the same hotel with Roy Orbison and Grandmaster Flash and Richard Thompson in New
Man,
Orleans.
That's just a being open to it and not having any like backup plan.
No,
And when you do that, it happens. You know.
I just went for it, man. And
Yeah.
it was cheap here, you know. I think I paid like 175 a month for my apartment. And
Right.
so then Lucinda, she added another guitar player whose name is Derek O'Brien, who's in the
Hmm.
house band at Antone's.
Right.
So within 4 months, he gets me into the Lou Ann Barton band.
Right.
So that becomes a two guitar band, and all of a sudden, I'm like, on the Antones. I work. I'm basically on the guest list or the payroll, whatever you want to call it. I could go
Right. Right. Right.
every single night for free, and we would play. I mean, we could play. Clitter would bring in all the greats, all
Mhm.
of them, and then the house band would back them up, and the house band was incredible. They knew every tune, how to back up everybody, and these guys love coming down.
Mhm.
And you'd have Lou Ann open up a set for him, man. He'd slide us all 200 or 300 bucks, and it was like that's my whole month's rent.
Yeah.
So it's like I made more money then playing in Austin than I do now. That was 30 years ago.
That's amazing. But man, what a like, education, of just being in that scene and playing every night. I think that's the step. I think I was lucky to catch the tail end of like, even as a kid playing 4 or 5 nights a week, playing 4 hours a night, being forced to solo all the time, because that's just not there for people now. They have all this knowledge that we don't have much quicker because it's easier to find it, but they don't get to apply it the way that we did, and you even more than me. I caught the tail end.
Yeah, but you caught enough of it. And I think the other thing is because it's all laid out there for you now, you don't develop your ear. I mean, like literally. I mean, not to sound like an old guy, but I mean, it was literally pick up the needle and keep playing along with it and moving it back and forth. But I had to develop my ear. Nobody was sitting there on the screen showing me. I
Yeah.
mean, it's such a easy thing to fall into. Just get on YouTube. How do you play whatever? And it's right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Anything. But I've tried to impress upon people, and it was impressed upon me by Pat Metheny. When I was like peppering him with all these questions, like what's the magic secret? How do you get so good? And
Yeah.
finally, he just looked at me and just play gigs. Just play gigs, man. And I kind of feel like one gig is worth about 2.5, 3 weeks of good practice at home.
Yep.
You
Without
got to
question.
play gigs. You got even if it's like with your buddies in the basement, man. Play with
Yeah.
other people.
Wow. Well, okay. So then you're in the scene. You're part of the Austin family. When does the sideman stuff with Joe or with Mellencamp and that stuff start coming in? Who calls you for that? I'm assuming did Kenny call you or who calls?
Well, the Ely was first,
Right.
and I got that. That came through Roscoe Beck.
Oh, okay. All right.
I worked on a session. Actually, I came to LA to do a session with someone from a woman from Austin named Lisa Rhodes, and ended up on a session with Rick Murata and Roscoe. And I'm like, what am I? This is not even real.
Right.
Um, so anyway, Roscoe, that's the first time we met. He didn't know me. He didn't get me on that session. Somebody else did.
Okay.
Um, but Roscoe recommended me to Joe Ely, and one day I'm like, my usual sleep till noon. The phone rings before I'm awake, and it's Joe's brother asking me if I was available to go to Australia in a week with Joe and his band. And I think I'd met Joe hanging around Anton's late at night, but I was like in awe of him, and I was like, of course, yes, I'm available. If I'm not, I'll become available. And I
Right.
didn't have a passport, and he had to drive. I had to get pictures, and he had to drive to Houston and go to the consulate and get my passport made for me. It was back when getting a passport was more difficult.
Right. Wow.
So we had a couple of rehearsals, played one gig in Austin, jumped on a plane, and I'm touring around Australia, and that was the beginning of about 5.5 years of about the beginning of 5.5 of the best years of my life, and where I truly feel like that's when I became a player.
Mm.
And it was by the 200 gigs a year, work with a guy who was an artist in every sense of the word, who
Uh-huh.
taught me about dynamics and pacing. And in the 5.5 years, never once did I not see him give 110% ever. Never, not once, not for 1 second did he slack off. Or if, the most intense show we ever did that I can remember, we played some rickety ass club in Germany with the PA that was falling apart, and there was about 10 people there, and he leveled. I mean, he absolutely, and I'm like, that right there that's the deal.
Mm.
That's the deal. Don't open up your case if you're not ready to bring it.
Yeah, yeah,
It made a huge
absolutely.
impression on me. And
Wow.
so
And how old were you when you started playing with Joe? What when was that?
I was probably 24,
Okay. Yeah.
25 maybe.
Yeah.
Um, and he really let me. He made me. He was so generous, man. He long solos. He made me co-producer of the first record I did with him at 25 years old, and I'm like, this guy's like a special person, and I feel that way even more. And I watched the decisions he made over the years, and they were really based on what they were true to himself as an artist, and not you know making the most money. Um, there were several instances where I saw he had the opportunity to take like a certain turn to become the next Texas Springsteen or something like that, and he's
Right.
like, that's not me. I'm not going to do that. And consequently, today he has a very vibrant career that has evolved.
Yeah. Well, he has an incredibly staunchly, loyal fan base because of how honest everybody knows he is in his music,
Yeah,
without question. Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
Man, that must have been like going to Australia for the first time out of the country, playing like it must have been amazing.
It was awesome. It was unbelievable. I mean, we were opening up for a guy named Jimmy Barnes, who was like
Yeah,
like really
absolutely. Cold chisel.
cold
Yeah.
chisel, and they were. I mean, it was like one of the biggest things in Australia. So we were playing arenas,
Yeah.
and back then, totally fearless. I was just totally fearless. I was like, throw anything at me, and I'll relish it.
Yeah.
Anything except a really complicated chart. But gig wise, playing gigs, it was like, God, it was in Australia back then. It was kind of like what I bet it was like to be in Laurel Canyon in the 60s. It was real, like, super laid back. All the towns we played in were almost all of them were on the water.
Mhm.
And so this big beach surf culture, and people were so friendly. And it was, and I like the hotels we were staying in. We're like, Jimmy Barnes put us up in his hotels, and I was like, Shazam! I could get used to this.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the life of a sideman on good gigs. It is a nice thing,
it's
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I think you have to
Oh
do it
man.
both ways, man. You got to do your deal. I mean, I in my from that period, when back in the States touring, we called it, we were in a van pulling a trailer the whole time,
Yeah.
and then I go with Mellencamp, and I'm on a private jet staying at the Ritz Carlton, and then I get
Yep.
in Storyville, and I'm back in a van pulling a trailer. I mean,
Yep.
it,
Yeah.
it's about the music, man. It's not like how nice your hotel is. It
No.
really, I mean, I don't know. You got to stay humble.
Yeah. Well, okay, so then you have this period of sideman success with Mellencamp and all that. Um, are you writing all through that period? Or are you composing? No, not yet. Okay. So
Oh, not
when does that happen?
Well, I think it really happened around Storyville. I had written songs, but I'm hanging out with Lucinda Williams and Joe Ely and Jimmy Dale Gilmore and Butch Hancock and all their friends. Guy Clark, Rodney Crowell, all these people.
Yeah,
I'm like,
great writers, really great writers.
so I did develop not only appreciation of great songs, but a fear of of making an ass out of myself. If you can, comparing myself to what they were doing. And
Yeah.
when we started Storyville, it was like all of a sudden, all right, I'm not just a side man. We need some songs, and I kind of I started paying attention to that more and putting
Hmm.
more energy into it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
I mean,
wrote a couple of I still like.
yeah, man, you ended up writing a lot of great songs in that band. And then, I mean, does that open the floodgates? Because now you write, your material for your records now. I mean, does it just kind of it opens up a new part of you, you know?
Yeah, it really did. And so after Storyville, I started going to Nashville to do all these sessions, and
Right.
kind of got really, really lucky. And I had a Blake Chansey, really great dude, great producer, was doing a lot of big records at the time, and brought me up to do a John Anderson record. Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
and Paul Worley was co-producing it, and he was another guy that was really, he's still really active producing records up there. And it was like from that one record, both of those guys started hiring me for almost everything they did. And then the word gets around, oh, this new kid's in town, I got to have him. And then it runs the usual course,
Sure.
who's David Grissom? Give me David Grissom, give me a young David Grissom, and then who's David Grissom? I mean, it's like 10
Yeah.
years. That's a 10-year arc of my Nashville thing, not living in town. Um, so concurrently with that, I was doing writing, and I met Frank Liddell, who has a company called Carnival Music, and I signed a publishing deal with them, and was doing lots of co-writing, um, and wrote with some really great writers, and got really more honed in on the craft of it, and also the speed of as you know, if you sessions up there, everything happens so fast.
Very
Writing is
fast.
the same way. You got to be able to deliver, like, boom, on the spot. But I wrote with a lot of great writers, and it was a really, really great education in that regard. I wrote with Chris Stapleton when he first got to town, and we wrote 7 or 8 songs together. And I could tell, I could tell the minute I met that guy, this guy is special.
Hmm.
And look what happened,
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Dude, how
so
how often were you going to Nashville? Was it
man,
every month, a couple weeks, or
it was like when it was like in high gear, I was going a couple of times a month, and that
Mhm.
was when it wouldn't be just like we're going to go in and do 2 sessions and cut, see what floats. It was like come for 3 or 4 days and we're going to do the whole record,
Yeah.
or come for 3 days, we'll do the first half, 3 days we'll do the second half. And so it was a really, really uh, unusual situation that doesn't happen now. I mean, when to fly someone in from out of town, the budgets were much bigger. There
Yeah.
still was, people did still buy CDs, and it was an entirely different climate. Um, but yeah, man, I was like, uh, but I had to get on the train fast. I had to get on the program with the program. I mean, literally I can remember the John Anderson session, the first tune, um, they pass around the number charts, which I kind of knew how to read.
Yeah.
And they listened to the song one time down, and I'm making a couple of notes and thinking, and I look up and everybody's gone, and I'm like, where'd they? And I look out, they're all out at their instruments, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, so I realized, like, right then and there, it's like, yeah, you hear it one time, then you go make the record.
Yep. Yep.
Like 2 or 3 takes, and that's the record.
Yep. Yeah.
So that I had to up my game.
Oh, it's so fast there, you know. And the number charts, you got to be like, a lot of times this is a drummer writing the number chart, and everybody gets the chart, which is crazy to me, And
Uh,
uh, I remember the first time being in Nashville and writing the chart in six minor for a minor song, and just totally fucking up so terribly. You know what I mean? Like, because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
such a brain fart.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. But but as guitar players, though, it's a godsend.
Oh
Unless,
yeah.
there's a point at which the harmony gets too complex to where it's just crazy to try to write a number chart. But
Yeah.
for 99% of rock, pop, well, not necessarily pop, rock, country, blues,
Yeah.
Americana, the melding of it all together. The number charts, I mean, because like for me, I'm thinking two or three parts ahead the whole time.
Always.
Capo,
Yeah.
something capo to baritone, whatever. I mean, and so there's no transposing.
Yeah. When did you stumble onto that way of thinking in the studio where you already had multiple parts? Because everybody has that moment where they see a chart, they learn a song, they play the chords. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? And then you transition to, no, wait, I hear this part and I hear this part and I've got a job here, you know?
Well, it's different every time. And if there are two guitar players on the session, that is a completely different thing too. And if there are a bunch of if there sometimes there could be two keyboard players. So
Yeah, sure.
you're probably you might only play one pass, or sometimes there's not an acoustic player on the session, and you may have to track the song on acoustic and then go back and put all the electrics on after that. So I became conscious of it when I started working with, well, even with Joe Ely. He was good about, I started doing, multiple parts on his records and really thinking about how do we make each part have its own space sonically.
Mm,
And then I started getting really interested in the engineering aspect. When I was at sessions, I would try to discreetly ask engineers, why are you using this mic or that compressor? I would watch how they were monitoring, and listen to records from that perspective. Like, well,
yeah.
if the acoustics are hard panned, can you hard pan the electrics on top of them? Or so then I started thinking about the whole picture sonically. Do I want two electrics off to the side and maybe acoustic just at 1 o'clock, or what's it going to be? And so then Mellencamp, I developed that idea further with him, and he was really brilliant in the studio, taking these three-chord folk songs and turning them into rock anthems.
Mm,
Uh, but when I got to Nashville, I really started thinking about all this layering guitars. And I think, on a subliminal level, the first guy I really heard do that exceptionally well was Jimmy Page.
oh, oh, yeah.
And, you go back to his sessions even before Led Zeppelin, there was stuff that he did with Donovan and things where he would layer parts.
Yep.
But the Zeppelin stuff, if you really analyze it, man, the parts and the tones and the arrangements are brilliant. And
Yep.
then I really kind of got, I mean, another guy I really admire is John Leventhal.
Oh,
And his early stuff with Sean Colvin, I was still kind of in, just getting going in Nashville. And I really paid attention to what he was doing. I thought he was a master at layering parts. But then I kind of just got onto I got, I mean, it was amazing how many times they would want me to play baritone guitar because I had a way of playing baritone that worked in the context of that music. But it was all, it was kind of like if you look at the spectrum, if standard tune guitar is right here in the middle, a capo guitar above it, and a baritone, I was always trying to hear a part for that thing, and then I would peel it back depending on whatever somebody else was playing, and it
yeah.
evolved minute by minute, literally.
Well, that's the way. I mean, it's got to be in the moment, you know. You
Yeah,
can go in with a plan and a cookie cutter formula, but I mean, it only works if it works, you know. Yeah.
it's a team sport,
Yeah.
doing sessions. It's a team effort.
And man, so then how did the Dixie Chicks gig come along? Was it after you were already going to Nashville or no?
It was, yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
and yeah, I just got a call one day. I was in my studio. I mean, I'd worked with Lloyd Maines,
Mhm.
Natalie's father, a lot over the years, and I'd worked in Emily Robinson at the time, now Emily Strayer, her husband Charlie Robinson. I'd played on a bunch of his records and knew him, and actually we're just looking for a new guitar player. And Emily showed Charlie the list, and he said, "Well, just cross everybody else off to David and call him." And I was writing a song with somebody at my house. I can't remember who it was. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But they said, "Could you come over to the studio and talk to us? We're at Cedar Creek here in Austin." And I went over and hung out with them. They said, "Would you?" And after about 15 minutes, and they said, "Would you be open to being MD, the band leader?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'll do that." And I never auditioned or anything. I was just,
Wow.
and I got a call from the business manager saying, "Let's cut a deal. Let's, and it was a really, uh, it was a lot of fun. They're amazing, amazing musicians, and singer and strong, you know, strong in every sense as musicians and singers, people, and everything. It was a really fun opportunity to work with them. It is somewhat a funny. We did the first thing I ever did with them was Saturday Night Live. We did 2 songs on Saturday Night Live, and then we flew out the next morning to London
Hmm.
to rehearse for a few days. And the 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 chicks, the 3 women, had never. The first time they heard the band was when they walked into a rehearsal, and I had helped rehearse. We'd all helped each other, but we'd rehearsed everything and kind of rocked it up a little bit. And luckily, they liked it, and we had like 2 rehearsals. And then the first show was at the Shepherd's Bush, which was the
Yeah.
infamous, the very first gig.
That's the George Bush comment.
That was a George Bush comment, which
Yeah.
now it's like seems so innocuous. I mean, compared to what people say now, it's like
It really does.
it
Yeah.
was so harmless.
Yeah.
But things changed. They started to really change after that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. I didn't realize that was the first real gig
It
after
was.
Saturday Night Live with you. Wow. All right.
The other thing I learned on that gig was it was the first time having played thousands of gigs at that point in my life, I went through the entire gig where nobody in the audience ever looked at me or made any eye contact with me or anybody in the band. It was like all eyes were on the 3 girls. I mean,
Yeah.
I was like, this is different. This is going to be different. I mean, it had nothing to do with us.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, that's something I learned when I moved to LA and I started doing some of the tours that I was doing. Like, oh, wait a minute, they don't even need to see us. It was like we could be behind a screen. It,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Thank God the artist actually wants a real band because they don't need one.
I know. I know.
Oh man. Well, dude, so now you've transitioned like, to fully being doing. You still do a lot of sessions, obviously, but you do so much of your own thing commercially. You put out records, and when the world is normal, you go overseas and you play gigs. Um, was that 100% natural, or was it a concerted effort to get more into doing your own thing?
Uh, I just think it was a natural progression, really. It had a lot to do with songwriting because what I found was with the publishing deal in Nashville is that I was writing a lot of really good songs, and I had got some songs cut by Trisha Yearwood and Leanne Womack and Montgomery Gentry. John Mayall cut "What Passes for Love" before Storyville played it. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I was getting some songs cut, but they really weren't songs I would put on my record, and I got a little burned out. Um, and the session thing kind of started to trickle down a little bit, and I started writing more songs that when I got a publishing deal was over, I started writing songs that I wanted to put on my records, and so I was
Mhm.
like, well, let's make a record then. We hadn't made a record, and so
Yeah.
I did. I literally got my first computer and started recording. So I had to learn the computer and the software at the same time, and I just made a record.
Yeah.
I just figured out how to do it. Call somebody, hey man, how do you get it to? I can't get they you just repair the permissions and you'll be fine, or reboot. It's like computers have come so far now. You don't, we,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the latency's not even, we had all these things we were dealing with back then. But
Mhm.
I just started making records and I felt empowered doing it on my own. Having seen all the people that I worked with go through these battles with record companies, and I was free to, I felt like I had, I was a bit of a split personality as a guitar player and then a songwriter, and I could just put out the records I wanted to put out, and it was appealing to me. I put 4 or 5 instrumentals and then 4 or 5 songs that might be considered today Americana, or maybe there's a blues in there somewhere, but um, it was a situation where a record company would have a hard time figuring out what label do we put on this guy,
Sure.
and but I liked it, and it's just I just keep doing it, and it's just part of the whole thing. I feel like the more gigs I play, the more I can bring to sessions, the more songs I write, the more I can bring to uh, again sessions for other people. I mean, it's all connected. It's part of the
Absolutely.
big picture.
Yeah, it's all, it's a big, gumbo of how, the things you enjoy, the things you want to do, the things that make a living, and it all becomes, serving the same goal, which is just because you love it and doing it as best you can, you know.
Yeah,
But man, that feeling must be, when you start to release your own record and people buy it and people care and you start doing that feeling is there's nothing like that feeling that anybody cares about my shit, as I can't that's such a great feeling.
yeah, and also playing with your band live,
Yeah.
your tunes with guys that know your tunes,
Hmm.
or an audience that knows what to expect, at least knows the ballpark of what to expect, but is willing to go with you anywhere, which is a very common thing here in Austin.
Hmm.
Uh, Audiences are real open to that. I have not enjoyed playing live more in any environment than I have on the Tuesday nights down at the Saxon. I mean,
Yeah.
not every single night, but by and large, most of them are just a blast. And you've come down and played with us
Yeah.
twice.
Yeah.
You're the only
Yeah.
guy that's played the whole night with us.
Yeah.
So but that was all. Those were good times.
Oh,
And
dude, I had a blast. But yeah, that feeling of, doing what you really want to do, so being fulfilled in that way, and someone actually cares about it. What's
I know,
There's nothing better than that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Amazing, man. All right, let's get into my 10 questions.
No. Stump Dave.
Okay. All right. Number 1, when you started learning and playing, what was the first thing that when you got it under your fingers, you were so proud and it set the hook. Like, I can't believe I just got this. This is the coolest thing ever. I'll
Okay.
never do anything else.
Um, well, there would be two things maybe I would think of. The very first song that my second teacher taught me, it might have been Hey Joe, but I think it was Sympathy for the Devil. And
Oh,
it was the version off Get Your Ya-Ya's Out. So, I'm playing this little 5-watt Gibson thing.
yeah.
When I could play that, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm making music.
Yeah.
And I kind of learned, Keith Richards, that
Yeah.
simple solo thing. Uh, so that was kind of like that was like, all right, that's super cool. And then not long after that, um, I got Hendrix in the West
Oh, yes.
and a wah wah pedal,
Yeah.
and I actually got Voodoo Child down pretty good off the version. At least the intro and the not all the soloing, but
Uh,
that was like, oh man, you
yeah.
know, wow.
Yeah, like you could do this. Like this is that feeling when you've listened to something 8 million times and then all of a sudden it comes out. It's like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, I did it." Yeah. Uh, uh.
Yeah.
There's no turning back when that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So maybe you answered this question, but what was the first actual solo that you remember laboring over and learning note for note?
Oh God. I don't know if I could still play it, but probably something off of Live at the Regal,
Okay.
or back at the Magic Sam Sweet Home. You know,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
when I learned all that, which when I learned the Magic, I could play along with Sweet Home Chicago, the Magic Sam version. That was really uh, that was a really cool thing. Um, I kind of got the first, and a lot of stuff happened at the same time when I started. My ear got to the point where I could learn solos, and it would
Mm.
be um, like One Way Out, the Allman Brothers version.
Oh yeah.
Both those, the Dickie Betts solo on that, because I really wasn't a good slide player. I'm still not,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Me
think
neither.
Dickie Betts solo on One Way Out, I copped that note for note.
Oh yeah. Statesboro Blues, his solo,
Yeah,
huge for me.
yeah.
Uh, I remember, I remember learning uh, as a kid. One of the ones that completely I thought I've arrived was the ending lick of the intro of Revival when they play. It was like I can't believe I figured that out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And
unbelievable.
the first two Roy Buchanan records, man, I tried to cop
Oh,
as much stuff as I could off. And the pedal steel stuff started there, and then I got into the Sweet Little Lisa solo on the Dave Edmunds record, where
yeah,
Albert Lee is using a bead bender, and I didn't know it,
yeah.
but I was learning,
Mhm.
bending up with my first finger, which is what a bead bender would do.
Yeah.
But I learned that solo. It took me about a year.
Wow. Man, I hear Roy Buchanan a lot and you're playing, and it's funny, you wouldn't maybe think it from an outsider when they think David Grissom, Roy Buchanan, but the bends, man, the way you melodically bend and hold on to stuff, he was huge for me too in that regard. Huge. Yeah.
Yeah, the first two records, man, and the tone, the Telly into the Vibrolux.
Yeah.
I searched for that tone for a
Yep.
long time. That was giant.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. All right. What's the first thing you play when you pick up a guitar? Yeah, do your hands just go somewhere naturally?
Uh, Probably they go to uh, my hillbilly G chord. I'm an open string
Yeah.
junkie, and I guess G, I'm so lazy that it just happens. My hand seems to fit there the easiest, and so I mean, like I think my wife just hates the key of G because I'm in the house to pick up a guitar, and I'm always playing something right there to
Well,
start.
I knew before I even asked you that question that was what it was going to be. That it was going to be
Yeah.
G. I mean that's the first thing I think of when I think of David Grissom. It's like you have such a unique voice. And that's part of that open string thing. It's unbelievable. I know when I hear two notes that I'm hearing you.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's
Oh
cool.
man. Well, that leads to this question. When did you find that? When did you feel like a wall got knocked down or something, or a light bulb went off, and you started to find your voice? Was it just like an accident? Did somebody point out to you like, "Hey, that's really cool. You should do more of that"? Did something point you in this way of like, "I should go this way. This sounds like me. I like this."
I think it was more a question of somebody not telling me
Oh,
something. I did. The culture of what's not cool didn't exist. The internet
okay.
police weren't out there, and
Yeah.
the in Ely, back to Joe Ely, he really, when I got in his band was the same time I got a guy here taught me about vintage Marshalls, and I got a 50-watt Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
I got a high watt first, and it got stolen. I got a 50-watt Marshall, and I got my first PRS.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then I was playing in Ely's band, and I was sort of really influenced by Lloyd Main's pedal steel playing, who was in the band before me. And so I sort of had this beyond a telly, like a telly on steroids tone, and dragging the pedal steel licks, play, through that tone. And then at the same time, the thing about the first two Buchanan records that really is key, and I think is the way he would irreverently mash styles together. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you could hear, like, he could play Western swing like nobody's business. He could chicken pick like crazy, and then he could rip your heart out playing Sweet Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yep.
the instrumental version of that. So I felt like, the bluegrass stuff that I listened to in high school, Norman Blake, all those open strings, that's a big part of it. Um, Sort of the milking the note thing of Albert King and the expression of BB, and the melodicism of, even somebody like Joni Mitchell or Pat Metheny on Bright Side's Life, or
Mm-hmm.
the way Mike Brecker phrased. I
Yeah.
could never play the harmonically. I couldn't be in his ball game, but the phrasing of it all those things just kind of came together in an organic way. It wasn't like I set out to have my own sound. I didn't know any better
Uh-huh. Right.
back then, but
You certainly arrived on your own sound. I mean, it's like I said, everybody knows when it's you instantly, and it's always interesting to me how people get there. Obviously, they take all these influence together, but does it register or not while it's happening? And some people it does, some it just happens so naturally that you almost don't even know it. You just arrive there anyways.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
It's a good thing. I don't, it's one of those things I don't try not to think about too much, or if I
Yeah.
had thought about it too much when it was happening, it may not have happened.
And can I just say that when I saw you at the Marshall and the reverb tank, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Like I wanted to copy that rig so badly, you know.
It's hard to beat, man. It
Yeah.
is so hard to beat. I mean, I did a couple of little clips. I've still got everything, and
Yeah.
like now I'm playing through this 8-inch speaker so that we can converse.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
man, when I can really, like, I've got a 100-watt uh, Plexi PA head, which I
Mhm.
love because they're the lower gain. You just
Yeah.
turn it all the way up,
Yeah.
and the reverb tank into it. Oh,
Oh man.
nothing like it.
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. All right. What key or style, song, whatever, it's probably G, but what do you hear in your head? Like do you have a narration that happens just randomly? I'm hearing a shuffle basically 24 hours a day, and I'm hearing B flat, it never ends, 24 hours a day. Do
Really,
you have stuff like that comes and goes in your head all the time?
music comes and goes all day long, and it's not the same music though. Um, it really varies. In fact, like when I go see a movie, I rarely remember the movie because the visual experience of the movie sets off this stuff in my head. Music,
Uh-huh.
it makes music, it fires music. And
Yeah.
so I think it's definitely, it's always there, but it's not the same thing all the time.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
but I understand where you're coming from, where I get that, and I hear that in your playing, and that's why you are possibly one of the kings of the shuffle at the moment. Uh,
Man, there's just something about that groove that I can't let. I'll be laying down to go to bed, and it's like I have to finish that solo before I can turn off and get to sleep.
yeah, well, it could be a lot worse.
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Number 6. What's your biggest weakness on the guitar?
uh, okay, I'm going to put it in the context of my world.
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not a legit. I can't play. I mean, I'm a terrible jazz player, but that's not really my world. So in my world of sessions and live gigs, I would say I'm a very, very, very average slide player, and I'm a terrible reader of,
Okay.
of notation. So that is normally not a problem. Like I can usually fake my way through the slide stuff, and then also in certain finger picking styles, I'm not
Yeah.
great. When
That's
you
dude. That's mine right there. Especially acoustic finger
acoustic
picking.
finger
Yeah.
picking,
Yeah.
because when you do sessions, man, the day comes more often than you want where you are called upon to play a ballad with a
Yeah.
singer by yourself for the
Yeah.
entire first verse, and
Yeah.
there's nothing else there. It's all you, and it has to be perfect.
Oh
And
yeah. You're under a microscope and you're being compressed and it's clear as day and yeah. Yeah.
everybody's looking at you.
Yep.
You know, and so that's why there are specialists, guys that do sessions all day long for years and years and years don't really have a hole in their arsenal.
Yeah.
But I got hired because I did have something a little different, but I
Hmm.
understood the music and could fit into the system. But ultimately, I am not the guy for everything, and I'm
Yeah.
the first to admit that.
Which is it bums. I'm like you in that regard. It bums me out sometimes because it means I don't get the call. But it also means that the calls I do get are more gratifying because they really wanted me.
So, totally, and when I was getting flown up, that was like, yeah, you're flying me up to be me. And I got really good advice from someone really, because I was like nervous the first couple of times. And he said, man, you cannot go up there and try to play like somebody else. You have to do your thing. It's the only way. And what he was talking about, which I think is really good advice for anybody, is playing with conviction and
Hmm.
commitment. And if you start second guessing, well, maybe I need some more Brent Mason, or this is too rock, you're not going to play with authority. And what he was saying was, you got to go up there and do your thing and own it. And it
Yep.
was great advice.
Yeah. That is great advice. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh man, I knew you were going to say reading though. I knew you were going to say slide is a big weakness for me too though. I kind of just gave up though because I grew up with Derek Trucks, and the second I stood on stage next to him, it was like, yeah, I don't need to do that at all. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the ultimate
Yeah.
reason not to.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Who's a big influence on your playing that people would be really surprised to hear?
um, I would, let's see, probably I would go back to people I mentioned earlier. Well, I would say Pat Metheny,
Yeah.
the melodic approach, especially on the first couple of records. And so Pat and Jocko both. Jocko's way of phrasing and the way he would play that funky stuff is really, I mean, that really inspired me. The percussive, syncopated, totally pocketed thing, along with Pat's real melodic thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't play that kind of music, but I listen to it a lot.
Yeah.
And I like, when I took the lesson from Pat, he just kept saying, play melody, just play more melody, man. He kept saying it over and over again, play melody, and so that is, that has stuck with me. And you wouldn't know it all the time. Sometimes I just play really rhythmic solos that are really the notes are kind of. It's like I almost see the guitar sometimes as a percussion instrument,
Yeah. Sure.
and that's where some of those open strings and muted things come in, where and maybe that's kind of back to that Michael Brecker, uh, Jocko phrasing thing that sort of seems to. I always I used to hear like bebop in my head all the time.
Hmm.
You know, I could sing solos, but I couldn't play them.
Yeah. Yeah, but the rhythmic part of it starts to seep in, even if you can't play it harmonically.
It does, and that's like if I'm like in B, you know,
Yeah.
much the rhythmic element of that as it is the notes, and so
Yeah,
it's
well, you've really tied together your internal clock to your hands in a really useful way, where you can subdivide. You know, you're because you're hearing that all the time. Dun, dun, da, da, ba, ba, da, 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 ba, da, 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 ba, da, da, ba, da, da, ba, da. And you that stuff comes out in your improv, and you know it's not as easy as it sounds. It's like that's a lot of work to do that.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is a lot of work, but it doesn't feel like work if you're enjoying it. And so I mean, I always try to make practice enjoyable, but uh,
Yeah.
there are times when you just have to buckle down and practice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, but if it is, it can be hard, but as long as you enjoy it, you'll grow and you'll keep coming back. It's when you get discouraged. That's why I tell younger guys all the time they're stuck and I can't do this. It's like, well, dude, are you practicing like with a smile on your face? Like, just take a fucking breath and it's like it doesn't matter how hard it is, but if it's something you don't even like, you're not going to succeed. You got to like it. You got to enjoy it.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, number 8. Would you rather have a great guitar and a shitty amp, or vice versa? A crappy guitar and a great amp on a gig.
Great guitar and a shitty amp.
Okay, we're opposite on this one.
I can make almost any amp sound good, but if it's, I'd rather have a good instrument in my hand that I can get around on, and then deal with the amp later. And if I have,
Interesting.
I can bet. I mean, yeah,
Interesting. See, we're opposite on this, and it's been split 50-50. Everybody's answers totally split down the middle. But I know for me personally, if I have this guitar and some terrible crate, the show will not be as good as if I have any guitar, even with light strings, which is kryptonite for me, but I have my rig. It would be better off for the audience that way than the
yeah.
other way around. Yeah.
Well, I could make it could be, a Roland jazz chorus I might, my first tour with Ely in Ireland, I got a
Yeah.
Roland jazz chorus, and that was one of the more challenging things I've ever done.
Did you even
Uh,
bring? Because I mean, you're used to Marshall. So what? Did you even have that many pedals with you?
that was when I was using a TT Electronics booster and a
Yeah.
Boss digital delay. That was it.
So
You
that's
know,
going to do nothing on a JC 120.
it will not. No,
Yeah.
I didn't even know how to use an overdrive pedal. I was just using the boost part of it, and I
Yeah.
was getting some overdrive out of the amp,
Yeah.
and then hitting the front end harder.
So what did you do with the JC? What did you? Because turning that up is not pleasant.
I don't know. I stood at the front of the stage and act like I'm in it, and the crowd doesn't know. The crowd doesn't know. They don't. They really don't know. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's interesting. I found this to be to be true several times doing shows where I thought, God, my tones suck. I didn't play well, but I was trying. I was trying my best. That I think the audience picks up on that
Hmm.
element of not giving up. That the human struggle, if you will. I mean, whatever. And uh, people come up to me after gigs on some of those gigs and say, "That's like the best I've ever heard you play." And it was the tenacity and I'm not going to quit.
Yeah.
I think that they subconsciously they identify with.
Interesting, man. Interesting. All right. See, you're a better man than me. It's a choice not to let that stuff get to you. If you get stuck with a JC 120 or something, and make the gig still be a success for the audience. Yeah.
Yeah, the only times I've actually had like major meltdowns. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and there's been a few times I'm not happy about that when I lose my patience with things, but you probably know what I'm talking about. There are certain gigs in Europe
Hmm.
where if you're like over 90 dB, you, you get like you really it's really like an affront
Yeah.
to to certain people, and that's what's harder. I'd rather have the worst guitar and the worst amp and be able to at least turn up a little bit than a best guitar and the best amp and have to turn the master volume down to 1
Yeah.
and still think I'm too loud, or actually get to the point where I have to play differently because
Yeah.
I play really hard.
Yeah.
And if me and I guarantee you, and I know you play hard too. And if
Hmm.
you hand our guitars with our rigs to a lot of other players, it isn't going to sound. First of all, it won't sound the same because our hands all do different
It
things.
it is weird when someone picks up my guitar. Some of it's the strings, and my rig. It sounds like they have no gain and there's no brightness. It's all dark because they just don't hit it like we
They
hit
don't,
it.
they don't hit it. And so, conversely, I remember when I first moved to town and met Eric, and he offered to check out my 50-watt Marshall. I went down to where he kept all his gear, and I remember
Hmm.
playing through. He goes, he played through the Marshall, and I could tell. He goes, yeah, it's a little bright for me, and I don't know. He said, do you want to play into my rig or whatever? And I can remember playing his rig, and it was like the worst tone known to man because he has a really light touch and knows how to
Yeah.
make it makes it work for him. And I was like,
Yeah.
the echo plexes were, freaking out. But I've
Well, you,
actually had sound men to ask me, can you play soft? Can you play softer? And I mean, like I said, the amps turned way down. I mean, it's like almost off, and they're like, no. Can you just not hit it so hard? And I'm like, well, no, I can't do that.
can't do that. No.
That's not, no.
I wonder. I mean, you've spent time with Robin. I plugged in. I'll go ahead and say this out loud because he doesn't even know it. But once his Dumble was left somewhere where I had access to it, and I plugged in because I couldn't help myself. He wasn't there, and I played the Dumble, and I couldn't get the Robin sound out of it. And it was like, this is all bright, and I just can't make it happen. And I wondered, does he play softer than I do, or something like that? Did you ever plug into his amp?
I did. I played on that Mystic Mile record,
Right.
the
Yeah.
Blue Line. And I remember one of the first things I did was go, I think he asked me to say, yeah, check out my rig. Because I think I had to rent amps. It was at Sound City.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
or that's the place that's closed, right? The Grobot, or you
Yeah.
bought the
Yeah. That's Sound City. Yeah.
that's where it was. And I remember plugging into his rig, and it sounded just like me. It didn't sound anything like him. It sounded just like me. I was like, "Can I use your amp?" And he's like, "No."
Yeah.
It's not a lot better than this rental stuff over here in the corner. But
Yeah.
I remember it
Crazy.
sounded really good.
Nice. Nice. All right. Number 9. What keeps you motivated, man? What keeps you pushing forward to be a better musician and guitar player tomorrow than today? What are you working on?
Um, well, I think if I don't play, I have to start. I feel like I lose some sort of spiritual. There's something about music that I connect with something that's bigger than me, and
Hmm.
so I don't play at my own risk. And if I go a couple of days without playing, I can feel everything just kind of get a little squirrely. I get a little weird. And so in this environment, I'm trying to just keep my chops up. Um, as you know, not playing gigs, that's a whole nother set of chops. And so,
Yeah.
I'm trying not to worry about that too much. I'm just trying, try to stand up and play a little bit and dig in, not much, but at least a little bit. I always work on my time. I work with a metronome. I try to go through stuff that'll keep me in shape for sessions. Um, I'm in a period right now, to be frankly, I'm kind of in limbo with this whole quarantine thing, and I vacillate. I've gone through stages of the first 3 months. I was busier than I've ever been at my home studio. To then it slowed way down, and then I started getting really depressed that we're not going to play any more gigs for. It's going to be a year, and I'm not going to go to Europe next summer and everything. And now I'm kind of coming around the corner on it, where it's like I'm just allowing myself some space to just feel whatever I feel. But I really feel like the next step is going to be I'm going to write some songs. I'm going to get some new shit together. And the way I've always um, come up on new things is I play my way into it. And
Hmm.
so that involves just sitting with the guitar and playing. And I know it goes against the cardinal law of a lot of people's practice routines and what people teach you about practicing. But for me, it's just always been about playing music. Now, if I find something I'm stumbling on or I want to work on, I'll work on it for a long time. But that might lead me into something that becomes idiomatic or part of my sound. I mean,
Yeah.
everything I've
Yeah.
come upon has been just that way of practicing. And so I'm trying to continue to do that. I'm trying to play acoustic and electric. Um, Check out some new music, not get caught up in social media too much,
Yeah.
not, the comparison thing on Instagram. I mean, everybody posts their 60-second highlight
Yeah.
reel, and it's like, you know, that's comparison, I think, is the enemy of creativity. So I'm trying to keep my chops together, but also be open to where's the silver lining in this environment and lead and find, maybe I'll find something new. And I
Yeah.
actually been, I've been playing with a few pedals and like, just anything, a different sound or whatever. And I'm kind of getting these little glimpses out of the corner of my eye of like new stuff,
That's
just
cool.
new stuff
Yeah.
somewhere out there.
Well, that's good. That's a good attitude to have, man. And what's crazy, what you said just passed by quickly, but trying to stand up and play. Dude, I've stood up and played twice in 6 months. And it's like, yeah, you feel like an alien to even put your strap on. It's like that is a weird, it's very weird.
I had somebody ask me that when I was, 30 years ago. When you practice, do you practice standing up? And I said, no, I never do that. And it goes, well, when you play gigs, do you sit down? And I go, no, I stand up. Well, your hands at a completely different angle.
Yep.
Both
Yep.
hands lay on
Yep.
the guitar differently. So at this point in my life, it's really not that hard for me to make the transition. I
Mhm.
find I play different when I stand up. And a lot of times
100%.
in sessions when I play solos, if I really need, if nobody stands up in the studio anymore, man. And so it's
No.
like I'm real self conscious about it. But if I've done a couple of passes and it's not going anywhere, I stand up, man, and it inevitably becomes better. It's just an attitude thing, It's
Yep.
like a
Yeah.
shift. Like I'm not messing around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to me, standing up is associated with a gig, which
It
just
is,
puts me in a different headspace.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool, man. All right. Number 10. Where do you want to be, man, in 5 years? Is it further down your path of, solo records and doing more gigs under your own name? Or is it just kind of keep on keeping on, a little bit of this, a little bit of that? Do you have a 5 year goal?
No,
Okay.
I don't have a specific 5-year goal. Um, I want to just I would feel very blessed and grateful to continue to do what I'm doing right now, which in itself, I feel like, knock out this last month of quarantine in itself involves moving forward.
Mhm.
And I enjoy love to do sessions. I love to play on records. I love being in a room with musicians and making records, you know, not belabor it, really knock it out with a bunch of great players. I love playing gigs and I love writing songs, and I wouldn't want any of those to go away. So I mean, obviously, I'd like to get better at all three of those things and just to be able to continue to do this is such a gift.
Yes.
And man, I'm very, very grateful, and that's, so my 5-year plan is to try to stay grateful.
That's a good one, man. That's a good 5 year plan. You know, I can definitely appreciate it. I wish I should take more of that headspace myself. Well, dude, that was the 10 questions. So thank you. And then for members, please can watch. There's going to be an extra video. If you're not a member, hit join right here and become one. But dude, I can't thank you enough for this. The fact that we're bros now and I can pick your brain or even just have a conversation with you is mind blowing to me. You're an incredible inspiration to me. You always have been. And thank you for taking time out of your day to do this, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks, Josh. I want to say the same back to you. I remember meeting you at that Storyville gig,
Yeah.
and it's so cool to uh, I think the first time we met again was at the Canyon Club when I was playing with Robin out there.
Right. Yeah.
But I had seen you on, and I'm like thinking on YouTube doing some stuff. I'm like, that's that guy I think that I
Yeah.
remember meeting. And so, you're playing your ass off, man, and
Thanks, man.
inspiring a lot of people, and you know, admire everything. You're being a great player, having a great work ethic, and really being generous with your talent. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, David. And we'll have links to all things David Grissom in the bottom of this video. So make sure you buy music and support him. And for members, we'll be right back. Thank you, everybody.